If prison worked perfectly, people would go in once and never come back. No revolving doors, no repeat sentences, and no familiar names cycling through the system again and again and again. A clean break, a clear consequence, a second chance that actually works. But that is not the reality. Across England and Wales, there's a significant proportion of people released from custody will reoffend within 1 year. Some return quickly, within weeks of being released. Others drift back over time, and some become trapped in a long-term cycle of offending, release and recall. For them, prison is not an endpoint. It is not a line drawn under the past. It is a part of the pattern, a system they move through again and again. So the question we ask tonight is not just about crime, not just about punishment. It is this: what actually works to stop people going back?
Welcome everybody to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome to Around the World Today. I'm Terry Davies. In the last episode, we asked a simple but revealing question: who goes to prison in modern Britain? And what we found was not randoms, but patterns. Patterns shaped by deprivation, by trauma, by addiction, and by systematic pressure, like remand and recall. Today, we take that one step further, because once we understand who enters the system and why so many return, we are left with a more difficult question, a more uncomfortable question: what actually works to reduce reoffending? Because ultimately, the success of the justice system is not measured by how many people it can punish, but by how many people it can help to stay out. Reoffending is not a side issue. It's not a minor flaw in an otherwise functioning system. It is essential. It shapes the prison population. It shapes public spending. It shapes public safety. A substantial proportion of people released from prison will commit another offence within 12 months. For those serving short sentences, the picture is even more stark. In some groups, reoffending rates approach or exceed half. Pause for a moment. That means for every 2 people released, 1 may return. And not necessarily years later, some within months, sometimes within weeks, and sometimes within days. This means that prison is not functioning as one-time interventions. For many, it's part of a repeating loop: release, instability, reoffending, return. And the loop just continues and continues. And that loop does not just affect individuals. It drives overcrowding. It places pressure on staff. It stretches the probation service. It consumes public resources again and again and again. But beyond all of that, it realises a deeper question, a more fundamental one. If prison is supposed to reduce crime, why does it often fail to prevent it from happening again? To understand what works, we first need to confront what doesn't. And the evidence here is remarkably consistent. Short custodial sentences are among the least effective tools for reducing reoffending. They disrupt, but they do not repair. They remove someone from their life, their home, their job, their relationships, but only temporarily. And when they return, they often come back to no housing, no employment, damaged relationships, and fewer options than before. In many cases, prisons become a destabilising force, not a stabilising one. Then there is deterrence. The idea that punishment alone will prevent future crime. It sounds logical, right? But it assumes that something important, that people make decisions rationally. And many offences do not happen in calm, rational moments. They happen in chaos, in addiction, in desperation, in emotional crisis. In those moments, the idea of future punishment, weeks, months, or even years away, fades into the background. And then there is fragmentation. Support exists, but it often does not connect. Housing services operate separately from employment support. Healthcare operates separately from probation. Addiction services run in parallel, but not always in coordination. So a person leaves prison needing everything at once, but receives support in fragments. Oh, not out or not at all. The result? Gaps. And those gaps are where people fall. And that cycle starts all over again. If there is one concept that consistently emerges across research, policy, and lived experience, it is this: stability. Because without stability, change is incredibly difficult, and stability is not abstract. It is practical. It is everyday. It's housing. Safe, secure accommodation is the foundation. Without it, everything else becomes harder. A person without a fixed address may struggle to register for benefits, access healthcare, attend probation appointments, apply for jobs, and without stability, survival becomes the priority, which can lead quickly back into reoffending. Employment provides more than an income. It provides structure, routine, purpose, identity, a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to stay out of trouble. But there is a contradiction at the heart of this. We expect people to rebuild their lives, yet many face significant barriers to employment because of their criminal record. So we ask people to change without always giving them the tools to do it. Relationships. A stable relationships matter. Family, friends, mentors. They provide support in moments of pressure. They reinforce positive decisions. And often they are one of the strongest proactive factors against reoffending. Because change is rarely achieved alone. Rehabilitation. What shows promise? Despite the challenges, there is evidence of what can work. Not perfectly, not in every case, but consistency, enough to matter. Education. Education in prison shows clear benefits, from basic literacy and numeracy to vocational training, technical qualifications. These programs increase employability, and with employment comes structure, stability. Substance misuse treatment. Drug and alcohol dependency is a major driving for reoffending, but only when they continue after release. Because stopping the support at the prison gate often means losing progress. Continuity matters. Behaviour matters. Cognitive behavioural programs aim to change patterns of thinking, to challenge assumptions, to improve decision making, to build self-control. When delivered effectively, they can have measurable impact, but they require engagement and they require trust. The human factor is, and then there is something harder to measure, but impossible to ignore. Human connection, a probation officer who listens, not just enforces, a mentor who believes change is possible, a family member who stays present. These relationships often make the difference because systems can provide structure, but people provide belief. Through the gate, the critical moment, there is a phrase used in the criminal justice, through the gate. It refers to the moment someone leaves prison, and it is one of the most critical points in the entire system, because this is where everything either connects or collapses. A person leaving prison may need immediately a place to stay. Access to medication, money for food and transport, identification documents, contact with support services. If these needs are not met quickly, sometimes within hours, risk increases sharply. Some individuals leave prison with very little. A small discharge payment, a set of licence conditions, and a long list of expectations. And if support is delayed, the same pressures that led to offending return almost immediately. This is where effective through-the-gate services matter most. But provision is uneven, and demand often exceeds supply. Probation supervision. Probation is the bridge between prison and community. At the best, it provides structure, support, and accountability. But it also carries risk, because supervision must balance two competing pressures. Too little, and risk goes unmanaged. Too much, and breach becomes more likely. As we discussed in a previous episode, many returns to prison are not for new crimes, but for breaches of the licence conditions, missed appointments, curfew violations, breakdown in communication. So effective probation requires balance, and that balance depends on manageable caseloads, skilled staff, strong relationships, access to real support. Without these, probation risks becomes enforcement without support. And that just leads, doesn't it, to setting people up to fail. Because if they don't have the proper support that they require, so the strong relationships they need, the staff who are capable of providing this, because you know, you've probably got like 5 probation officers in one area, and they've probably got caseloads of hundreds of people. How do they know every single person on their caseload? It's like a GP these days. There is a systematic problem within every system that we are talking about on this podcast, everyone. We're talking about now prisons. In previous episodes, we've talked about transport. We've talked about the overseas territories. We've talked about how they all link up, that there is a problem here. But the crucial problem that we're talking about today is reoffending. And again, we're noticing that without the structures in place, people will just miss through. I know that some people who end up in prison may have learning disabilities such as, or even a disability such as autism, and stuff like this. So missing certain time slots becomes almost normal. As many of you know, I'm dyspraxic, and I never run on time. I either run half hour early or an hour or two late. There's nothing in the middle. I'm never on time for anything. I'm either early or late. Now, if I turned up to a probation appointment, and I wouldn't because I've never, gone down that route, I would probably be penalised for it. I know that when I've turned up to a doctor's appointment late, and it's on my medical record that I'm dyspraxic, and, it's part of the condition that timekeeping isn't our best, I would be penalised, wouldn't I? I was given a row by a doctor, my own GP, because I was 20 minutes late for an appointment. The bit the doctor didn't care about was that I fell. So that's what made me late. I'm normally early for the doctor's appointment. And if it wasn't a locum, then, my GP would have given me a call because he's been my GP since I was a baby. But without someone knowing you and getting to know you that, if you're going to turn up late to like your probation appointment, say you've been meeting this person like for months on end, right? And you turn up late for 2 weeks, for your appointment, and you can't help it because, the first week the bus didn't turn up. The second week you overslept. These are things that have happened to me in my own voluntary work that I do away from podcasting and stuff. Just in the last week, it does happen. So, if the person didn't know it's not in your nature, they'd automatically put in a recall. You'd automatically be recalled to prison for something that you couldn't control, or something, or even an accident. Is that right? Again, without proper support, probation risks becoming enforcement without support. Probation is meant to be support. Do you know what I mean? Giving support. Helping people change their lives once they're out of those gates. So, if short prison sentences are ineffective, what is the alternative? One answer lies in community sentences. These include unpaid work, curfews and electronic monitoring, treatment requirements, structured rehabilitation programs. When properly resourced, they can be more effective than short custody because they allow people to remain in their homes, in their jobs, in their communities. They allow change to happen without total disruption. But there is a challenge: public perception. Community centres are often seen as soft, and political pressure can push policy back towards custody, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. Which brings us to a central transition. What works is not always what is popular. And that's the same as everything in life, really. What does work doesn't always mean that it's going to be popular with everyone else. For something working 5 times, you're always going to have 5 other people who say it didn't work. It's a bit like within customer service. When you have a bad experience, right? You tell 5 other customers, or 5 other people, 5 friends. When you have a good experience, how often do you tell people about your good experience? How often do you actually, go out and tell people about your good experience? Because the good thing is the popular thing. Do you know what I mean? When everything is working right, it is popular. But when everything is working badly, we revert back. We complain. We do this as humans. It's one of the human traits. When you think about it, you have a bad experience, you tell about 5 to 10 other people. You have a good experience, hardly anyone ever finds out. So the bigger picture. Reducing reoffending is not just a prison issue. It is a system-wide challenge, because the cases of reoffending sit with outside prison walls, in poverty, housing shortage, mental health provision, education gaps, labour market barriers. Prisons can respond to crime, but they cannot resolve these underlying issues alone. This is where we need to work together. So, if the drivers of crime exist in the community, then the solutions must exist there too. If you've got someone shoplifting, maybe we should find out why they're shoplifting. In some cases, people shoplift to feed their family or to feed themselves because, they're hungry, as we've pointed out in this episode. They may not be accessing the benefit system because they don't have a stable address. So if you don't have a stable address, you can't apply for benefits, meaning you have no money, meaning you can't eat. You can't support yourself, even if you've got a habit. Do you know what I mean? You can't support your habit. And I don't mean a drug habit, I mean like a habit, a chocoholic habit, or, smoking or drinking. So, obviously, if the crime exists in the community, the solutions of rehabilitation should also start and finish within the community. There are ways of doing it. How many times do you walk down a street and you say, oh, there's a lot of rubbish here, but there's no one to clean it up because the councils have practically done away with street sweepers? Well, I know something that would help: community service. And I don't say this from my soapbox because, yes, in the pandemic I helped to feed over a couple of thousand people. Most of them were from deprived areas, ex-prisoners, addicts. So that was a sense of community working to provide food? How about a community working to help these people stop committing crime? Stop reoffending? Because voluntary work does help, and it can turn your life around. I know people who have volunteered when they've come out of prison, and now they live a life, they have a job, they have friends, they have no addiction problems, they're living a life. That's because the community that this person has come into has supported them. That's, if you can save one person from reoffending, remember you're saving one place from an overburdened system. So what works? It's a simple question, but it's not a simple answer, because there is no single policy, there is no single program, there is no single moment that just turns someone's life around. There is no switch that flips from offender to non-offender. Change is not instant. It is a gradual thing. Change happens over time. It's fragile and often uneven. But despite that complexity, the direction of travel is clear. Not punishment alone, but purpose. Not disruption, but stability. Not isolation, but connection. Because when we look at the evidence and when we listen to lived experience, the same themes come back again and again and again. Stable housing, meaningful work, access to treatment, constant support, and relationships that reinforce change rather than undermine it. This is not about being soft on crime. It's not about being effective on crime. Because if the goal is to reduce harm, to reduce victims, to reduce pressure on the system, then the question is not how harsh a sentence is. It is what happens after it. Because if someone leaves prison with the same problems or even deeper ones, then return is not surprising. It's not shocking. It's not predictable. And practically tells us something important. It tells us that reoffending is not just about individual failure. It's often about system design. About whatever the structures around someone's support change or quietly push them back towards the same outcomes. So perhaps the real question is not why do people offend or reoffend, but this: are we building a system that makes it realistic for them not to do? Because people can change. We know that. The question is whether the system gives them a genuine chance to change. Next time on Around the World Today, we'll take a look at that question even further. We'll step back from the system as it exists and begin to challenge one of its core assumptions. Is prison always the right answer? Because if short sentences don't work, if cycles of reoffending continue, and if the same pressures keep bringing people back, then we have to ask, are there better ways to respond to crime? Are there approaches that reduce harm more effectively, that hold people accountable, but also give them a real opportunity to change? From community-based justice to retrospective approaches, the alternatives used in other parts of the world, we explore what a modern justice system could look like if it is focused not just on punishment, but on outcomes. I'm Terry Davies. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, we'll see you next time on Around the World Today.
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.